But you're saying basically it doesn't matter if women aren't getting to the top because that's what's skewing that gender pay gap, isn't it? You're saying, well, that's just a fact of life. Women aren't necessarily going to get to the top.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter.
How on earth, like, what? I can't even get my words straight. What's going on, YouTube? It's Golden Boy, and in today's video, we're going to revisit a rather pivotal moment that introduced many, including myself, to Dr. Jordan Peterson. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist and a former college professor who gained notoriety through discussions about personal responsibility, psychology, and broader socio-cultural issues. His appearance on the British Channel 4 News was centered around his book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, and his interview was conducted by Cathy Newman. Now, my first encounter with him was through a segment of this interview, specifically about the gender pay gap, and it left a strong impression, particularly regarding the interviewing style of Cathy Newman. It seemed that her approach was somewhat combative, seeking to reveal contradictions and to assert a strong feminist perspective, which from my recollection, often led to misrepresentations of Peterson's views. So today, I'm going to be reacting to the entire interview to see how it played out and hope that I can learn something from his approach with Cathy Newman.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
Well, because there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they're certain to encounter difficult times. And they're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful and vengeful and arrogant and deceitful and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it? And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean, 90% of your audience is a male,
well, it's
right?
about 80% on YouTube, which is YouTube is a male domain primarily. So it's hard to tell how much of it is because YouTube is male and how much of it is because of what I'm saying. But
that makes sense.
What I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer, you know, that people have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world. And that also doing so is where you find the meaning that sustains you in life.
You know, he's absolutely right about that. I've been told throughout my life that I should have gone into A career, B career, C career. However, I feel like by going into those careers, I'm selling myself short because I want to do something larger that impacts large groups of people. I want to shift mindsets, but I want to do something big. I want to be known for something. Maybe there's a lot of men out there that just want to save the world, and maybe that's what I feel like I need to be doing, which is why I never chose those other careers that people told me I should be in, because I just never felt like those things were large enough, if that makes any sense.
What's gone wrong then?
Oh, God, all sorts of things have gone wrong. I don't think that young men hear words of encouragement. Some of them never in their entire lives, as far as I can tell. That's what they tell me. And the fact that the words that I've been speaking, the YouTube lectures that I've done and put online, for example, have had such a dramatic impact is an indication that young men are starving for this sort of message, because, like, why in the world would they have to derive it from a lecture on YouTube? No, they're not being taught that it's important to develop yourself.
But does it bother you that your audience is predominantly?
Yeah, so I know she's in the middle of asking her question. We'll go back on that, but I played sports growing up, and so there was a lot of coaching and encouragement from my coaches, you know, my father a lot as well. And so I was used to being in an environment like that, but it's really saddening and shocking to me that there's a lot of young men out there that have no idea what words of encouragement even sound like.
Does it bother you that your audience is predominantly male? Isn't that a bit divisive?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's no more divisive than the fact that YouTube is primarily male and Tumblr is primarily female.
Isn't it?
Tumblr is primarily female.
Right, you're just saying that's the way it is.
Well, I'm not saying anything. It's just an observation that that's the way it is. There's plenty of women that are watching my lectures and coming to my talks and buying my books. It's just that the majority of them happen to be men.
What's in it for the women, though?
Well, what sort of partner do you want? Do you want an overgrown child? Or do you want someone to contend with that's going to help you and that you can rely on?
Women have some sort of duty to sort of help fix the crisis of masculinity?
It depends on what they want. No, I mean, it's exactly how I laid it out. Like, women deeply want men who are competent and powerful. And I don't mean power in that they can exert tyrannical control over others. That's not power. That's just corruption. Power is competence. And why in the world would you not want a competent partner? Well, I know why, actually. You can't dominate a competent partner. So if you want domination...
Want to dominate, is that what you're saying?
No, I'd say...
So this is where it begins, so you're saying. So what he's getting at is actually really simple. She asks, well, if the focus is on men, then how does that benefit women? And he's just simply saying, well, it benefits everyone, especially women, when they have a competent partner. Why wouldn't you want that? And if you don't want that, then the only reason you wouldn't want that is because your aim and your goal and purpose is to dominate your partner. And when you have a competent partner, they won't let you dominate them. They'll constantly contend with you and debate with you and argue with you and try to create some type of boundaries in the relationship that you won't like. That's pretty much all he's getting at. And who would call that, what I just described, a healthy relationship? So if the question is what's in it for the women, men bettering themselves, becoming more responsible, focusing on goals and personal achievement and things like that, that only benefits the women, and therefore it benefits families and it benefits everyone.
I'd say women who have had their relationships impaired, their relationships with men impaired, and who are afraid of such relationships will settle for a weak partner because they can dominate them. But it's a suboptimal solution.
Do you think that's what a lot of women are doing?
I think there's a substantial minority of women who do that. And I think it's very bad for them. They're very unhappy. It's very bad for their partners, although the partners get the advantage of not having to take any responsibility.
But what gives...
You know, that is incredibly important to point out. I understand that there's a such thing as heartbreak. I understand that there's a such thing as disappointment and resentment and jealousy and envy and anger and frustration and a slew of other emotions that come with bad breakups and really impaired relationships, as he called it. However, you owe it to yourself to always look for the best possible partner and to not let those things alter your core being, simply because how does it benefit you, again, like he's talking about, how does it benefit a woman to choose a man that can be easily dominated? She's certainly not going to be happy with him. She's certainly going to be exuding, at least in my opinion, a lot of masculine energy. And why on earth would she want to do that? It's just not healthy.
For their partners, although the partners get the advantage of not having to take any responsibility.
But what gives you the right to say that? I mean, maybe that's how women want their relationships, those women. I mean, you're making these vast generalizations.
I'm a clinical psychologist.
Right.
What gives you the right to make an assessment like that is what she's asking. Maybe these women like their relationships that way. Well, first of all, Cathy, he's not saying it in a way to pass any judgment. He's just making an observation that when women tend to choose weak partners, they tend to be unhappy.
Right, so you're saying you've done your research and women are unhappy dominating men.
I didn't say they were unhappy dominating men. I said it was a bad long-term solution.
Okay, you said it was
It's not
making
the
them
same
miserable.
thing. Yes, it is. And it depends on the time frame. I mean, there's intense pleasure in momentary domination. That's why people do it all the time. But it's no formula for a successful long-term relationship. That's reciprocal, right?
The gender pay gap stands at just over 9%. You've got women at the BBC recently saying that the broadcaster is illegally paying them less than men to do the same job. You've got only 7 women running the top FTSE 100 companies.
Yeah.
So it seems to a lot of women that they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
It does seem that way, but multivariate analysis of the pay gap indicate that it doesn't exist.
But that's
So
just
you
not
do a
true,
uni-
is it?
That's
I mean, that
absolutely
9% pay gap, that's a gap between median hourly earnings
Yeah.
between men and women.
But there's
That
multiple,
exists.
yeah, but there's multiple reasons for that. One of them is gender, but it's not the only reason. Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
Right.
You say, well, women in aggregate are paid less than men. Okay, well, then we break it down by age, we break it down by occupation, we break it down by interest, we break it down by personality.
But you're saying basically it doesn't matter if women aren't getting to the top, because that's what's skewing that gender pay gap, isn't it? You're saying, well, that's just a fact of
No,
life.
it's saying
Women
it
aren't
doesn't
necessarily
matter.
going to get to the top.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter.
How on earth, like, what? I can't even get my words straight. How is she getting that from what he's saying? All he's saying is that, yes, if there's a gap of 9%, there's reasons for it. And if there is a gender pay gap, it's not exclusive to the fact that women are paid less just because they're women and men are paid more just because they're men. There are underlying reasons as to why women get paid 9% less than men on average in the UK. But for some reason, it's like that went completely over her head. This is what I watched before, and for some reason, it's irritating me a lot more now than it was when I first saw it.
Or either.
You're saying
I'm
it's a
saying
fact
there are
of life.
multiple reasons for it.
Yeah, but
and they
those
aren't being
reasons,
taken into
why
account.
should women put up with those reasons? Why should
Why should
women be
put up with it?
content
I'm not
not
saying
to
that
get
they
to the
should
top?
put up with it. I'm saying that the claim that the wage gap between men and women is only due to sex is wrong. And it is wrong. There's no doubt about that. The multivariate analysis have been done. So I can give you an example.
You keep on talking about multivariate analysis.
Let me give you an
No.
example.
I'm saying that 9% pay gap exists.
Yeah.
That's a gap between men and women. I'm not saying why it exists, but it exists.
Why would you not want to say why something exists? Are you, how are you even a journalist? As a journalist, your job is fair and accurate reporting. You don't just take something on the surface and align it to your own personal viewpoints and assert that out to the rest of the world and put words in this gentleman's mouth. What is wrong with you?
Now,
Yeah, but
if
you
you're a
have to say
woman,
why
that
it
seems
exists.
pretty unfair.
You have to say why it exists.
But do you agree that it's unfair? If you're a woman,
Not necessarily.
and on average you're getting paid 9% less than a man, that's not fair, is it?
It depends on why it's happening. I can give you an example. Okay,
That's right. Hold your ground.
there's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. And agreeable people get paid less than less agreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men.
Again, a vast generalization. Some
It's not
women
a
are not more
generalization.
agreeable than
Yes,
men.
that's true, but that's right. And some women get paid more than men.
So you
Exactly. There are agreeable women and there are agreeable men. But it just so happens that agreeableness in women trends slightly higher than it does in men. So that's one of the factors that contributes to the reason why they get paid less. Now, that's likely because maybe when they get a starting salary or they get their year-end raises, they don't ask for more money. They don't fight for more money. And that's between men and women that are too agreeable. But he just wanted to point out that women on average are more agreeable than men. Likely because women biologically are set up to take care of children, so they have to tend to the child's needs. That's probably why that exists. But Cathy Newman's never interested, so far from what I've seen, into why something even exists in the first place.
So you were saying that by and large, women are too agreeable to get the pay rises they deserve.
No, I'm saying that that's one component of a multivariate equation that predicts salary. It accounts for maybe 5% of the variance, something like that.
So surely
you
the
need about
answer-
another 20, you need about another 18 factors, one of which is gender. And there is prejudice, there's no doubt about that, but it accounts for a much smaller proportion of the variance in the pay gap than the radical feminists claim.
Okay, so rather than denying the pay gap exists, which is what you did at the beginning of this conversation, shouldn't you say to women, rather than being agreeable and not asking for a pay rise, go and ask for a pay rise? Make yourself disagreeable with your boss.
Oh, definitely, there's that. But I also didn't deny it existed. I denied it existed because of gender.
Okay.
See, because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
So the pay gap exists.
I don't know why she just missed what he just did. He just overtly let her know that he's paying attention to what she's doing and that he's going to carefully analyze everything that she's saying and choose his words wisely. Because it seems like he's picked up on the fact that she has an agenda. And she's been trying to paint him in a corner for about the past minute and a half or so. Because remember, the interview started off pretty lightly. And, you know, man...
exists, you accept that. But you're saying, I mean, the pay gap between men and women exists, but you're saying it's not because of gender, it's because women are too agreeable to ask for pay rises. So
it's one of the reasons.
Okay, one of the reasons. So why not get them to ask for a pay rise?
I've
Wouldn't
done
that be a fairer way of proceeding?
many, many times in my career.
And they just
I've
don't?
counseled. Oh, they do it all the time.
Do you agree that you would be happy if that pay gap was eliminated completely? Because that's all the radical feminists are saying.
It would depend on how it was eradicated and how the disappearance of it was measured.
And you're saying if it's at the cost of men, that's a problem?
Oh, there's all sorts of things that it could be at the cost of. It could even be at the cost of women's own interests. So
because they might not be happy if they get equal pay.
No, because it might interfere with other things that are causing the pay gap that women are choosing to do.
Like having children.
Well, or choosing careers that actually happen to be paid less, which women do a lot of.
But why shouldn't women have the right to choose not to have children or the right to choose those demanding careers?
They do.
Why is she making this about rights and privileges? He didn't say women don't have the right to choose their own careers. He just said that if you eliminated the pay gap and just flat out made everything equal between men and women without any consideration for things like overtime, maybe seniority, maybe skills and techniques, or even just the power of negotiation, just flat out said everyone gets paid the same, it may come at the cost of women's own interests. And for some reason, that turned into, why shouldn't women have the right to choose their own jobs? Man, this lady is absolutely unhinged.
They can. Yeah, that's fine.
But you're saying that makes them unhappy, by and large.
I'm saying that no, I'm not saying that. I actually haven't said that so far.
You're saying it makes them miserable.
No, I said that what was making them
words in
miserable
this
was
man's
having
mouth, man.
weak
Oh my
partners.
gosh.
That makes them miserable.
Right.
I would say that many women around the age of, I would say between 28 and 32, have a career family crisis that they have to deal with. And I think that's partly because of the foreshortened time frame that women have to contend with. Like women have to get the major pieces of their life put together faster than men, which is also partly why men aren't under so much pressure to grow up. So because for the typical woman, she has to have her career and family in order pretty much by the time she's 35, because otherwise the options start to run out. And so that puts a tremendous amount of stress on women, especially at the end of their 20s.
I think I take issue with the idea of the typical woman, because, you know, all women are different. And that's what I want to just put another quote to you from the book.
Well,
you know, let me let him finish his thought really quickly and then I'll chime in.
They're different in some ways and the same in others.
Okay, you say women become...
Okay, so here we are again. He pointed out something that's observably true. You know, there's this old saying that women mature faster than men. And all that means is that women have to get their lives in order before men, just like he said. You know, they have to take things more seriously because they have to select the right partner to have children with, the right partner that's going to help take care of them and take care of the family and things like that. So women are burdened with having to make the right choice because this choice can affect them for the rest of their lives. Just like many other choices in life, but the person you have kids with and the person you marry, that's an incredibly, incredibly important choice. And the average everyday woman is struggling with the idea of finding a good career because she's likely gone to college and got her degree. And so she wants to get her money's worth and she wants to be a career woman. She might want to be a boss. She may want to be an entrepreneur. Hey, she may even want to be an artist, maybe a doctor or a nurse, but she's struggling trying to manage that career while also trying to look for a decent partner to have a child with. And all he was doing in this moment was just empathizing with that. And she just had to take out and pick apart this one simple word, the typical woman. There are more typical women in the world than there are extraordinary women. It is what it is.
Become more vulnerable when they have children.
Oh,
and
yes.
you talked in one of your YouTube interviews about crazy harpy sisters.
What's
So, simple question. Is gender equality a myth in your view? Is that something that's just never going to happen?
It depends on what you mean by equality.
Right.
You know,
Being
if you
treated
mean
fairly,
men and women,
getting the same opportunities?
fairly, we could get to a point where people were treated fairly or more fairly. I mean, people are treated pretty fairly in Western culture already, but we can
But they're
improve
really
that.
not, though, are they? I mean, otherwise, why
depends
would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK? Why would there still be a pay gap, which we've
Oh, well,
discussed
that's
at
easy.
length?
It's easy to
Why are
answer
women
that
at the
question.
BBC saying that they're getting paid illegally less than men to do the same job?
Well,
That's not fair,
Well,
is
let's
it?
go to the first.
Well, wait a minute. Why are there only 7 women running for, I forget exactly what she said, but first of all, if it's a very, very important job, which I believe she's about to point out, what motivates a person to do a job like that? She said 7 women running Fortune 500 companies. Do you even know what it takes to be a CEO? That's a never-ending job. And most people in the world, men and women, don't want to do that job. So it takes a very, very specific type of person to do that job. And because women tend to want to bond with children and stay close to family, they're often not lining up to do those jobs. And again, she's talking about the 9% pay gap, in which he tried to explain wasn't just based on gender. And now she's pissing me off. She's already pissed me off and she's pissing me off some more.
The first question, those are complicated questions. Seven women, repeat that one. There's only
7 women running the top FTSE 100 companies in the UK.
Okay. Well, the
I mean,
first
that's not
question
fair.
might be, why would you want to do that?
Exactly. Why would you want to do that? That is the best question to ask in response to something like that. Why would anyone want to be a CEO? Sure, you get paid extremely well. You get paid more than most people in the entire world. But at what cost? Why would you want to do a job like that?
Why would a man want to do it? I
Well,
mean, there's a lot of money. It's an interesting
there's a
job.
certain
you know?
number of men, although not that many,
Right?
who are perfectly willing to sacrifice virtually all of their life to the pursuit of a high-end career. So they'll work. These are men that are very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually very, very conscientious. They're very driven. They're very high energy. They're very healthy. And they're willing to work 70 or 80 hours a week, nonstop, specialized at one thing to get to the top.
So you're saying women are just more sensible. They don't want that because it's not a nice life.
I'm saying that's part of it, definitely. And
Yeah.
so I work
So
for...
you don't think there are barriers in their way that prevent them getting to the top
Oh,
of
there
those
are
companies?
some barriers, yeah, like men, for example. I mean, to get to the top of any organization is an incredibly competitive enterprise.
Yep.
And the men that you're competing with are simply not going to roll over and say, please take the position.
So let me come back to my
absolute
question.
all-out warfare.
Is gender equality a myth?
I don't know what you mean by the question. Men,
She does this thing to where he'll break something down and she'll immediately move on to the next topic. Like it's extremely annoying. If you're an interviewer or a journalist, again, your goal is to dig and uncover certain things and ask maybe some difficult questions, which I do believe that she's doing, but she's doing it in such a disingenuous way to where if I were Jordan Peterson and I don't even know how he's been so patient. I mean, he is a clinical psychologist, so he's had the training, but by this point, I would have ended the interview. I just wouldn't be able to take it.
Men and women aren't the same, and they won't be the same. That doesn't mean they can't be treated fairly.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it means equality of outcome, then almost certainly it's undesirable. That's already
Definitely.
been demonstrated in Scandinavia. Because in
What
Scandinavia...
do you mean by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable.
Well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it of their own accord. I've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law. Those are ineradicable differences. You can eradicate them with tremendous social pressure and tyranny, but if you leave men and women to make their own choices, you will not get equal outcomes.
Right, so you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen.
So at this point, as soon as she says, "So you're saying," I automatically know she's about to put some type of words in his mouth or say something that he hasn't said. And what he said was really, really important, because what she's getting at is that there is no equality and that women still have to fight for equality, because otherwise, why would there be a 9% pay gap? Why would there be only 7 women running Fortune 500 companies in the UK? If there were really true equality, then we should see a lot more women in the same positions as men. When in reality, all he's saying is that in Scandinavia, they made it their purpose in society to make sure that there were no social differences between men and women beyond the biological differences that we can't eradicate. So after decades of running the experiment, what they found was that even though they made men and women virtually indistinguishable from one another socially, men still went into STEM fields like engineering, and women still went into people fields like nursing, which is why he said that there were 20 to 1 female nurses to men, and why there's 20 to 1 male engineers to women. So that proves that men and women are biologically different, and that determines the choices that we make. And one of those, and through our choices, we end up getting a 9% pay gap, and we end up only having 7 women running Fortune 500 companies. Ma'am, come on, I'm picking this up. And you're a journalist with more experience in the field than I'll ever have. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Only if they're aiming at equality of outcome.
So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine.
It's not only fine, it's eminently desirable for everyone, for individuals and for society.
But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really saying.
It depends on your measurement techniques.
Oh my gosh. All right, I'm pausing a hell of a lot. This is probably pissing you guys off, but okay, she's getting at equality of outcome. And I don't even think she was aware that there are 2 forms of equality out there, or 2 ideas of equality, I would say. There's equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. And what he's saying is that equality of outcome is not desirable, because you'll just be putting people in seats just because they're different. So if there are 5 women in the boardroom and there needs to be 10 people in the boardroom altogether, then we have to fill in 5 men just to make it equal. However, what that doesn't allow us to do is choose the best person for the job. So what he's saying is that equal opportunity is more desirable, because we know for sure that we're choosing the very best candidates. Everyone should have the same opportunities at success, and the same opportunities in life. And even though there is a such thing as prejudice, there's racism and all other types of obstacles out there, we try our best to give everyone equal opportunity to ensure that everyone is where they need to be, and that they've earned their position, and that nothing was given to them.
They're doing just fine in medicine. In fact, there are far more female physicians than there are male physicians. There are lots of disciplines that are absolutely dominated by women. Many, many disciplines, and they're doing great. So
Let me put something else to you from the book. You say the introduction of the equal pay for
Changing
equal
the
work
subject.
argument immediately complicates even salary comparison beyond practicality for one simple reason. Who decides what work is equal? It's not possible. So the simple question is, do you believe in equal pay?
No.
Well, I made the argument there. It's like it depends on
So
who
you don't
defines
believe
it.
in equal pay?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Because a lot of people listening to you will just say, I mean, are we going back to the dark
That's
ages
because they're actually
here?
not listening. They're
I'm
just
listening very
projecting
carefully,
what
and
they
I'm
think.
hearing you basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms, equal outcomes is how you defined it.
No, I
If
didn't
I
say
was
that.
a
I
young
said that
woman
equal-
watching that, I would go, well, I might as well just go and play with my Cindy dolls
I
and give
didn't
up
say
trying
that.
at school because I'm not going to get the top job I want because
said
there's
that
someone sitting there saying it's not possible
I
and it's
said
not
that
desirable,
equal
it's going to make
outcomes
you
aren't
miserable.
desirable. That's what I said. It's a
Yeah,
bad
it's not
social
desirable.
goal. I didn't say that women shouldn't be striving for the top or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second.
Striving for the top, but you're going to put all those hurdles in their way, as has been in their way for centuries, and that's fine. You're saying that's fine.
No, I really
The
think that's-
patriarchal
I
system
really
is
think
just
that's
fine.
silly.
What is
I
going
think
on?
that's silly. I really do. I mean, look at your situation. You're hardly unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I have
How do
battled
you
quite
manage
hard
it?
to get where I've got
Exactly.
to.
Good
So
for
that's
you.
okay. Battling is good. This is all
It's
about the fight.
inevitable.
But you talk about men
Why
fighting. I mean,
would
let me
you
just
ha-
put another thing to you from the book.
Why
You're
would
saying
you have to
real...
battle for a high-quality
She's
position?
switching the topic again.
Well, I notice in your book you talk about real conversations between men containing, quote, an underlying threat of physicality.
Oh,
Wait, before we move on to the next topic, oh my gosh. I mean, she asked him if he believed in equal pay, and he said he's made the argument there. Just because I may have the title of a manager and my peer may have the title of a manager, we don't work the same, even though we do the same job. Maybe I put in more overtime hours than he or she does. Maybe my team drives more money for the business. So if I'm getting certain results, even though we have the same title, I could argue to my boss that I should be paid more, and I would argue for my raise.
oh, there's no doubt about that.
What about real conversations between women? Is that something, or are we sort of too amenable and reasonable?
No, it's just that the domain of physical conflict is sort of off limits for you.
Well,
And
you
it's
just said
rather
that I've
unfortunate.
fought to get where I've got.
Yeah,
can't
What
be
does that
this
make me?
dumb.
A sort of proxy man or
I
something?
don't imagine that yeah, to some degree, I suspect you're not very agreeable.
So that's the thing. Successful women, I'm not very agreeable.
Right. I've noticed that
successful-
actually in this
Exactly.
conversation.
At least
and
we
I'm
can have a
sure
joke
it
about it.
served your career well.
Successful women, though, basically have to wear the trousers, in your view. They have to sort of become men to succeed, is what you're saying.
Well,
If
if they're
they're
I've had
competing
to fight to
against men,
succeed,
but-
if they're
therefore
going to
I'm an
compete
honorary
against
man.
men,
Oh, shit.
certainly
Yes.
masculine traits are going to be helpful. I mean, one of the things I do in my counseling practice, for example, when I'm consulting with women who are trying to advance their careers, is to teach them how to negotiate and to be able to say no and to not be easily pushed around and to be formidable. And you need to, if you're going to be successful, you need to be smart, conscientious, and tough.
Well, here's a radical idea. Why don't the bosses adopt the male bosses, shall we say, adopt some female traits so that women don't have to fight and get their sharp elbows out for the pay rises? It's just accepted if they're doing the same job, they get the same pay.
That's one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard. So if I've been in business for 50 and 60 years, and I've battled my way to being at the top, to being in the top spot of my industry, why would I then go adopt more feminine traits? Because I'm going to get steamrolled. That's why I wouldn't do something like that. Like, you can't... Oh gosh, man. I have never had such trouble gathering my thoughts because this is just so ridiculous that I can't even articulate a decent enough response to this.
Well, I would say partly because it's not so easy to determine what constitutes the same job.
But that's because, arguably,
yeah,
there are still men dominating our industries, our society, and therefore they've dictated the terms for so long that women have to battle to be like the men.
No, it's not true. It's not true. So, for
Where's the
example,
evidence?
well, I can give you an example very quickly. So I worked with women who worked in high-powered law firms in Canada for about 15 years, and they were as competent and put together as anybody you would ever meet. And we were trying to figure out how to further their careers. And there was a huge debate in Canadian society at that point that was basically ran along the same lines as your argument, is that if the law firms didn't use these masculine criteria, then perhaps women would do better. But the market sets the damn game. It's like...
And the market is dominated by men.
No,
So
it's
what I'm
not. It's
asking you-
not. The market is dominated by women. They make 80% of the consumer decisions. That's not the case at all.
If you're talking
80%.
about people who stay at home looking after children, by and large, they are still women. So they're going out doing the shopping. But that is changing.
They make all the
what I
consumer
want to ask
decisions.
You, okay, so
the
what I wanna
market
ask
is
you-
driven by
okay,
women, not men.
Right.
Okay, and if you're a lawyer
And they
in
still
Canada...
pay more for the same sort of goods. That's been proven, that men, you buy a blue bicycle helmet, it's going to cost less than a pink one. Anyway, we'll come on to that.
It's partly because men are less agreeable.
Exactly.
Right.
Because if I go in the store, I'm looking for a bargain. And if I'm looking for a bicycle helmet, I'm not going to buy the bicycle helmet that's $10 when there's a perfectly good one for $3. A woman may go on a store and see that $10 bicycle helmet, but because it's in her favorite color, she just may buy it, even though there is another one that's $3, but it's cheaper. Maybe she associates the one that's $10 of having higher value. Like, why wouldn't a business be interested in maximizing profit? So you mean to tell me that businesses think that they can be successful if they charge men less for products? It doesn't make any sense. If anything, they're looking to maximize their profits. And they did start at one point selling the bicycle helmets, both bicycle helmets, for $10. They just realized the men weren't buying them. This is one of the dumbest arguments I've ever heard.
Right, so they won't put up with it.
I want to ask you, is it not desirable to have some of those female traits you're talking about? I'd say that's a generalization, but you've used the words female traits. Is it not
He never
desirable
said
to have
female
some of
traits.
them at the top of business? I mean, maybe there wouldn't have
They
been
don't predict
a
success.
banking crisis.
They
if
don't
that had
predict
happened.
success in the workplace. The things that predict success in the workplace are intelligence and conscientiousness. Agreeableness negatively predicts success in the workplace. And
you're
so does
saying
high
that-
negative emotion.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that female traits don't predict success.
But I did.
All right, that's it. I'm dead. I'm done. Revive me. Revive me, please. I'm done. I can't. I really can't, man.
I didn't say that
Intelligence and
intelligence wasn't. I didn't
conscientiousness
say that
do.
intelligence and conscientiousness
Well, you were saying that
weren't
intelligence
female
and
traits.
conscientiousness by implication are not female traits.
No,
I mean,
I'm not
that's very
saying that.
dangerous
I'm
territory.
not saying that at all.
Are women less
There's-
intelligent than men, by and
No,
large?
no, they're not. No, the data on that's pretty clear. The average IQ for a woman and the average IQ for a man is identical. There is some debate about the flatness of the distribution, which is something that James Damore pointed out, for example, in his memo, but there's no difference at all in general cognitive ability. There's no difference to speak of in conscientiousness.
So I think what he's trying to say, and I like how she was trying to set him up there. And again, I love his responses. I love how patient he's been in this interview. Again, I would have walked away a long time ago, but he said that there is a difference in the distribution. So I wonder if that means that, like, for example, when we hear about geniuses and people with high IQs, we often hear about men being placed in those high IQ categories. And some people may argue on the other side, that's just because men get more attention and that's due to the patriarchy. So we're just boosted on the forefront of everything, right? But I think what he's trying to say is that when it comes to average IQ, that the male and female IQ are the same. However, at the extremes is where they make the differences. So when it comes to the flatness of the curve, I believe this is what he's saying. I could be wrong, just correct me in the comments, is that there are more women on average with a higher average IQ than men are, but men exist more so on the extremes. So there's more male geniuses, but there are more males with lower IQ than there are women with lower IQ and women with higher IQ. So I think that's what he's getting at, if that makes any sense.
Women are a bit more orderly than men, and men are a little bit more industrious than women. But the difference isn't big. But
I know
that
plenty of-
averages into
Plenty of men
conscientiousness.
who aren't necessarily as
Well, of
industrious.
course,
But we'll,
these are-
we'll,
okay.
we'll
But no,
female
but you
traits,
asked me
though,
a
why
question.
are they not...
Feminine traits,
Why
let's
are they
say.
not desirable at the top of... Feminine traits, why are they not desirable at the top of business?
It's hard to say. I'm just laying out the empirical evidence. Like we know the traits that predict success.
But we also know, because...
This is what I was trying to get at before, but I really couldn't articulate any thoughts when she said, why don't some of the bosses adopt some female traits? And he just said that they don't predict success. But he also said it was hard to say, meaning that maybe there are some businesses that are successful with more feminine traits.
Companies, by and large, have not been dominated by women over the centuries. We have nothing to compare it to. It's an experiment.
True, and it could be the case that if companies modified their behavior and became more feminine, that they would be successful. But
You
there's
seem
no
doubtful about
evidence
that.
for it.
Right.
I'm not neither doubtful nor non-doubtful. There's no evidence
So why
for
not
it.
give it a go, as the radical
Because the
feminists
evidence
would
suggests,
say?
well, it's fine. If someone wants to start a company and make it more feminine and compassionate, let's say, and caring in its overall orientation towards its workers and towards the marketplace, then that's a perfectly reasonable experiment to run. My point is that there is no evidence that those traits predict success in the workplace. And there's
Because it's
this
never
evidence
been
is,
tried.
well, that's not really the case. Women have been in the workplace for what, at least ever since I've been around. The representation of women in the workplace has been about 50%. So we've run the experiment for a fairly reasonable period of time, but not, certainly not for centuries.
Let me move on to another debate that's been very controversial for you.
Let me move on. It's my favorite thing.
You got in trouble for refusing to call trans men and women by their preferred personal pronouns.
No, that's not actually true. I got in trouble because I said I would not follow the compelled speech dictates of the federal and provincial government. I actually never got in trouble for not calling anyone anything.
Right.
That didn't happen.
You wouldn't follow the change of law, which was designed
Not
to
once it was
outlaw
law.
discrimination.
No.
Well,
that's what they said it was designed to do.
Okay, you cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right to be offended? That doesn't make any sense. Everyone has the right and privilege to feel whatever it is they want to feel. And I have freedom of speech to be able to express myself, to formulate and exchange different ideas. And it just so happens that sometimes by expressing myself or exchanging those ideas, you end up offending someone. Now, I don't think that anyone, and look, and there are people like this, and I have no idea why. There are people that hate people for whatever reason. They've been taught to, they've had a negative experience, and they decide to stay away from the entire group of people. There's all sorts of reasons why people hate other people. But I wouldn't personally believe that my right to freedom of speech trump someone else's right to feel some type of way. Those things, they're not even the same. How does that person know? How does this trans person know that they're not offending me with the way that they dress? And I'm not saying that they do, but I'm just throwing her logic back at her. How does this person know that by dressing the way that they do and identifying the way that they identify, how do they know that it doesn't offend me? So does their right to freedom of expression in that way trump my right to freedom of speech? No, they cancel each other out. If they don't like what I'm saying, they can express displeasure of it. And if I don't like how they're dressed or how they're presenting, I can express displeasure of it. Now, there are laws to prevent hate crimes that protects them, and there very well should be, but the overall framing of this question is piss poor. It doesn't make any sense.
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. Like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like...
Exactly. And he called her out on that. So she's been twisting his words and trying to paint him into a corner this entire interview. And she's using her freedom of speech in order to do that. So she's risking offending him in the process because she feels justified in doing so. So if I feel justified in what I'm saying, expressing myself, risking offending a trans person, and they're doing the same in their expression, then we are the same. We just have a difference of opinion, perspective, and worldview, and we should agree to disagree. But it seems like he's made a good point on her, though. I want to see how she responds to this.
It's like you're doing what. Well,
I'm very glad that I have
but you get
exercised
my
my freedom of
point.
speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on.
So
And that is what you should do. But
and
you're
you-
exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
She has no comeback.
Ha, gotcha.
you have got me. You
Yeah,
have got me. I'm trying
yeah.
to work that through in my head. Yeah. It took a while.
Gotcha.
It did, yeah.
Took a while. You have voluntarily come into this studio and agreed to be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
A trans person in your class has come to your class and said they want to be called
And that's never
she.
happened. And I would call them she.
So you would. So you've kind of changed your tune on that.
No, I said that right from the beginning. What I said at the beginning was that I was not going to cede the linguistic territory to radical leftists, regardless of whether or not it was put in law. That's what I said.
I need to do more research on this because he did mention it briefly. And now he's saying that he's not going to give over linguistic control, even if it was the purpose of the law. So I'm wondering if in Canada, that maybe now it's considered hate speech if you don't use a person's preferred pronouns. And if that's the case, then that is extremely sad because I'm now responsible for how someone feels on the inside. I'm now responsible for someone's own perception of themselves. And I could be held legally accountable if I don't know what it is that they identify as that day. How do I know that this isn't something that's going to end next week? How do I know that you weren't something else last week? And I'm not trying to make it seem like anyone who's non-binary or anyone struggling with their identity flip-flops every 5 minutes, but you do have to ask those questions. How do I know? Like, why is it my responsibility to know that? And why am I being held accountable for how you feel on the inside? Now, this is just based on my assumption of what's going on and what he's talking about. Like I said, I have to do a bit more research, but it'll be really, really interesting if that's what's going on in Canada right now.
And then the people who came after me said, oh, you must be transphobic and you mistreat a student in your class. It's like, I never mistreated a student in my class. I'm not transphobic, and that isn't what I said.
Well, except you've also called trans campaigners authoritarian, haven't you? I mean, isn't that grossly
Well, only in the
insensitive?
broader context of my claims that radical leftist ideologues are authoritarian,
Yes,
which
but
they are.
You're saying someone who's trying to work out their gender identity, who may well have struggled with that, had quite a
No
tough
doubt
time
have
over the
struggled
years.
with it, yeah.
You're comparing them with, Chairman Mao, who
No, just the
saw the
activists.
deaths of millions of people. Well,
Just the
even if the
activists.
activists, they're trans people too. They have a right to say these things.
Yeah, but they don't have
Isn't
a
it
right to
grossly
speak for their whole
insensitive
community.
to compare them to Chairman Mao or, Pinochet, Augusto Pinochet. I mean, this is grossly insensitive. Isn't
I
it?
didn't compare them to Pinochet.
Well,
I did compare them to
He
Mao.
was an authoritarian.
He's a
wasn't he?
right-winger, though. I was comparing them to the left-wing totalitarians. And
Okay,
I do believe they are left-wing
Mao,
totalitarians.
Under Mao, millions of people died.
Right.
I mean, there's no comparison between Mao and a trans activist, is there?
Why not?
Because trans activists aren't killing millions of people?
The philosophy that's guiding their utterances is the same philosophy.
Wow.
The consequences are...
Not yet.
You're saying that trans activists could lead to the deaths of millions of people?
No, I'm saying that the philosophy that drives their utterances is the same philosophy that already has driven us to the deaths of millions of people.
Okay, tell us how that philosophy is in any way comparable.
Sure, that's no problem. The first thing is that the philosophy presumes that group identity is paramount. That's the fundamental philosophy that drove the Soviet Union and Maoist China. And it's the fundamental philosophy of the left-wing activists. It's identity politics. It doesn't matter who you are as an individual. It matters who you are in terms of your group identity.
You're just saying these things, though, to provoke, aren't you? I mean,
Not
you
a
are a
bit.
provocateur.
I never said
You're like
anything.
the alt-right that you hate to be compared to. You want to stir things up.
I'm only a provocateur insofar as when I say what I believe to be true, it's provocative. I don't provoke.
This woman refuses to allow this man to explain himself. Because if she did, while the example may seem extreme if you look at it based on the outcome, because she's saying, look, millions of people have died and trans activists aren't causing millions of deaths. What he's getting at is that the philosophy is the same, that there is no such thing as the individual, and it's about the overall group. It's a group identity, it's group think. And so if this group believes in control and it believes in authority and it believes in taking over language, so to speak, then it can get really, really dangerous for everyone, is what he's saying. But she just, I hope she got fired after this.
Maybe for
You
humor,
don't set out to
now and
provoke.
then, I'm not interested in provoking.
But what
Not in
about the thing
least.
about, fighting and the lobster? Tell us about the lobster.
Well, that's quite a
lobster.
segue. Well, the first chapter I have in my book is called Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back. And it's an injunction to be combative, not least to further your career, let's say, but also to adopt a stance of ready engagement with the world and to reflect that in your posture. And the reason that I write about lobsters is because there's this idea that hierarchical structures are a sociological construct of the Western patriarchy. And that is so untrue that it's almost unbelievable. And I use the lobster as an example because the lobster, we divulged from lobsters in evolutionary history about 350 million years ago, common ancestor. And lobsters exist in hierarchies, and they have a nervous system attuned to the hierarchy. And that nervous system runs on serotonin, just like our nervous systems do. And the nervous system of the lobster and of the human being is so similar that antidepressants work on lobsters. And it's part of my attempt to demonstrate that the idea of hierarchy has absolutely nothing to do with sociocultural construction, which it doesn't.
Let me just get this straight. You're saying that we should organise our societies along the lines of the lobsters?
No.
I'm
that's
saying
not
that
what
it's
he's saying.
inevitable that there will be continuity in the way that animals and
Gosh.
human beings organize their structures. It's absolutely inevitable. And there is 1/3 of a billion years of evolutionary history behind that. Right? That's so long that 1/3 of a billion years ago, there weren't even trees. It's a long time. You have a mechanism in your brain that runs on serotonin that's similar to the lobster mechanism that tracks your status. And the higher your status, the better your emotions are regulated. So as your serotonin levels increase, you feel more positive emotion and less negative emotion.
So you're saying, like the lobsters, we're hardwired as men and women to do certain things, to sort of run along tram lines, and there's nothing we can do about it?
No, I'm not saying there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
Because it's like in a chess game, right? There's lots of things that you can do, although you can't break the rules of the chess game and continue to play chess. And your biological nature is somewhat like that, is it sets the rules of the game, but within those rules you have a lot of leeway. But the idea that, one thing we can't do is say that hierarchical organization is a consequence of the capitalist patriarchy. It's like, that's patently absurd.
I find this very interesting because there are a lot of people out there that believe that hierarchy is a social construct. And what he's simply explaining is that lobsters have hierarchical structures similar to humans, and that our brains or their nervous systems respond to serotonin the same way that ours do. And so if the lobster can follow the same hierarchical structure, being a completely different species than we are, then that proves that these structures are biological and that what we're seeing is something natural, not something that was constructed to keep people at the lower end of society versus the higher end of society.
Wrong. It's not a matter of opinion. It's seriously wrong.
Aren't you just whipping people up into a state of anger? And
Not at all.
What?
Divisions between men and women. You're stirring people up. You have any critics of you online get absolutely lambasted by your followers. You've
And
got to
by
call
me
them off, haven't you?
generally.
Sorry, your critics get lambasted by you. I mean,
If
isn't
they're
that
academics,
irresponsible?
not at all. If an academic is going to come
Okay.
after me and tell me that I'm not qualified and that I don't know what I'm talking about,
So
like,
you're
it's
not going to say to
seriously
your
not the
followers
same.
now, quit the abuse, quit the anger?
Well, we'd need some substantial examples of the abuse and the anger before I could detail that question.
There's a lot of it out there.
Well, let's take a more general perspective on that. So I've had 25,000 letters since June, something like that, from people who told me that I've brought them back from the brink of destruction. And so I'm perfectly willing to put that up against the rather vague accusations that my followers are making the lives of people that I've targeted miserable.
Jordan Peterson, thank you.
My pleasure. Nice talking with you.
So that was equally as interesting and enlightening as it was frustrating. Jordan Peterson displayed a tremendous amount of patience in answering Cathy Newman's questions. You know, to be put in front of someone who clearly had an agenda and to handle yourself with so much patience and finesse, it's truly remarkable. And from what I observed, he only used two major techniques that each and every one of us could practice every single day. He listened closely and he was very, very careful with his words. And being careful with words is something that I try to employ every single day. I'm working on it. It's a skill that I'm actively developing, but I can admit that I do need to listen better. Sometimes I do jump to conclusions or make assumptions where I should be listening more. And so after watching this interview, I'm definitely going to try to practice that better. However, I am curious to see the aftermath of this video. You know, did he do any interviews talking about it? Because he said that she made him feel uncomfortable. And she commented about his followers, saying that anyone who has anything negative to say about him, they get absolutely lambasted online. So how about we take a look at the comments on this particular video, and we'll see if she talked about this interview after the fact. So here we are, 5 years, 46 million views later, and this video has 234,884 comments. I don't think I've seen that many comments on a video ever on YouTube. Typically, the comments are, at least from the way the math looks, it's usually between 1 and 10% of the view count. But this has 234,000 views. This is absolutely insane. Let's take a look and see what the top comment is. So with 1,400 upvotes, let's see. Manip3351 says his patience with her is just on a superhuman level, and I and I can't tell you how much I agree with that. You know, that's something that I truly commend. Like I said during the reaction, I probably would have ended the conversation because I would have lost my patience. But the patience he displayed truly was on a superhuman level. Documentarios 987 says, this lady actually helped me to understand and get to know how incredible Jordan Peterson really is. Exactly. So it seems like she achieved the opposite of what she was trying to do. And that's what I said at the beginning of the video during the intro, where, you know, when I was watching the clip about the pay gap, what I got from that was that she was trying to make it seem like he was someone that didn't believe in equality and that women should have the same rights as men. However, when I watched that clip, the reason it stuck with me was because he handled himself so well, and it's so crazy. Like, I have to absolutely thank Cathy Newman. So thank you. I appreciate it, because you are the reason that I'm a Jordan Peterson fan today. He also said she asked questions one after one, and he killed it with answers that 99% will not even realize. He is beyond great. Yes, he is. And that's an amazing comment, because it truly highlights the importance of handling yourself well under pressure and keeping your cool and remaining calm, no matter who's in front of you. And again, I hope to really have his level of patience someday, but it'll take a lot to get there. Okay, so it says, so Recovery Plus says, I watch this interview once a year. Watching JP speak uplifting truth in the face of ignorance is deeply satisfying. I gotta admit though, like I said, as much as that video was insightful and interesting, it was extremely infuriating. But I also feel a sense of deep satisfaction, just like Recovery Plus. Like, now that I have this information, like especially the information about the lobster, I think that that's just cool information. And just speaking about the biological differences between men and women in Scandinavia, and how no matter how hard that country worked to eradicate the differences between men and women, those differences got exacerbated by the free choice of the people in that society. So I just thought it was really interesting and really enlightening.
A recent interview with Dr. Jordan Peterson has now been seen by over 10 million people. I'm curious how you feel about the reach of that interview and the reaction that it's clearly generated.
I really enjoyed the interview. He said afterwards he really enjoyed it as well. I think it was only once some of his followers got on board and sort of started having a go at me over various things in the interview that it kind of went a bit crazy. But I'm pretty happy with the interview, and he was too, so that's job done, really.
First of all, I don't believe a word she says. It's been 5 years and they haven't reconnected, and I highly doubt that he enjoyed the interview at all. If he had to say in the middle of that interview that she was making him feel uncomfortable, there's nothing enjoyable about being uncomfortable. So that's going to be it for the video. And if you want to see me react to more Jordan Peterson, please like the video, as it helps it get recommended in the algorithm, and comment on what videos I should react to next. I appreciate each and every one of you that have made it this far into the video. Please subscribe for more content, turn on the notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.